In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Maple Grove, a small crowd gathered on a crisp autumn afternoon, the golden sunlight casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. At the center of the scene stood a large water valve, freshly installed in a trench along the sidewalk, its red handles gleaming with purpose. This wasn't just a routine maintenance job, it was the culmination of months of tension, debates, and a community on the brink of change. Tom Harper, the man in the plaid jacket, had lived in Maple Grove for over a decade. A plumber by trade, he was the kind of guy who fixed problems before they became disasters. But when the neighborhood's aging water system began to fail, leaks springing up like weeds, pressure dropping to a trickle, Tom knew they couldn't ignore it any longer. He'd rallied the residents, knocking on doors and holding meetings in his garage, convincing them to pool their resources for a new main line. Not everyone was on board, though. Margaret Ellis, the woman in the black dress standing to the left, had been the loudest skeptic. As the head of the Homeowners Association, she'd argued that the cost was too high, that they should wait for the city to step in. "We're not a charity, Tom," she'd snapped at one meeting, her arms crossed tightly. But when her own basement flooded after a pipe burst, even Margaret had to admit they needed action. Beside her stood Daniel Carter, the local councilman in the suit and tie, who'd finally secured a small grant to cover part of the project. He'd been a mediator between Tom's grassroots effort and the city's bureaucracy, though his polished demeanor often clashed with Tom's no-nonsense approach. The two men had butted heads more than once, but today, they shared a quiet nod of mutual respect. The others, neighbors in coats and scarves, watched as Tom gripped the valve's handle. This was the moment they'd all been waiting for. The new line was in, the connections were made, and now it was time to turn the water back on. Tom's hands tightened, and with a grunt, he twisted the handle. A low rumble echoed through the pipe, followed by the faint hiss of water rushing through. The crowd held its breath, half expecting a geyser to erupt from the ground, but the line held. A cheer broke out, and even Margaret cracked a rare smile. Tom stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans, and looked down the street toward the gated entrance of Maple Grove. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt united, the weight of uncertainty lifted. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the street in a warm orange glow, Tom knew this was more than just a fixed pipe. It was a reminder that sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones worth fighting for.